Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to episode number 20 of Lead to Greatness, where we believe in helping others reach their greatest potential, and together we can change the world. Today on Lead to Greatness, we have Roderic Yapp, featured on TED Talks, facilitator and coach, who specializes in developing leaders by changing the way people think and behave. He is also a former officer of the Royal Marines. Roger led 30 Royal Marines into combat on the front lines in Afghanistan. He founded Leadership Forces, which focus on developing leaders within organizations. This is Cedric Francis, and you're listening to Lead to Greatness. So, Roderic, how's it going?
I'm very pleased to be here. I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing great. How's everything going on your end?
Yeah, good. Facing down a pretty strong storm here. Nothing like you guys get over in the States, but the trees are sort of throwing themselves around a bit, and I got a bit of rain smashing against the window, but internet connection should hold. So I'm doing all right.
Right. So what's your location right now?
So I'm in Gloucestershire. A small town just outside a town called Stroud, which is in the UK.
Okay.
I'm about 100 miles, I have to think about this, I'm about 100 miles west of London towards Wales, for anyone that's been here.
Okay. Introduce yourself and tell the Lead to Greatness community a little bit about yourself.
So I grew up in the southeast of England, went to school in Sevenoaks. My father was a career diplomat, so I travelled all over the world with him. Until my parents got divorced when I was about 13, and then I sort of finished my schooling in Kent, just south of London. Went to university in Bristol, and then after that, sort of had this kind of aspiration that I wanted to do something a bit different with my life. So I joined the Royal Marines in 2005, really because it was kind of sense of I wonder whether I could do it.
Yeah.
I was one of about 34 out of 60 to pass out of training.
Wow.
Very demanding sort of 15-month training period. And then over the course of a 7-year career, I served in Sangin in Afghanistan. I evacuated civilians from Libya in 2011 during the Arab Spring. And then towards the end of my career, I specialized in boarding operations and did a couple of tours off the coast of Somalia, arresting and interdicting pirates trying to get into the sort of shipping lanes. And then I left in 2012 largely because, I'd done everything I wanted to do. UK military was about to pull out of Afghanistan in 2014, and I just didn't want to be in a sort of peacetime military. So I went and worked in the nuclear industry for a couple of years, coaching leaders who had been promoted because they were technically competent rather than necessarily having the skills to lead. I realized that was a problem shared by lots of other organizations, and in 2015 founded my own business which focuses on that, leadership development, executive coaching, those kind of things.
Wow. And you have an extremely long resume of leadership, and I'm definitely excited. I checked out your TED Talk, and we're going to get into that a little bit later on. What did your experience in the Royal Marines teach you about leadership?
So a number of things. Firstly, the role of a leader within the Royal Marines is to improve the performance of their people.
Okay.
And so very early on, I was taught that look after the lads, look after their development, make sure that in the time that they spend with you, that you improve all of them to the greatest extent that you can. You want to try and move them from having potential to fulfilling potential. And I think in order to do that, you need to have your sort of focus looking down on improving the guys beneath you. And I see in lots of organizations, people look upwards and they're looking to sort of impress the boss. They're looking to sort of, compete with their peers and try and get to the next level. And in the military, certainly in the Corps, I was taught that, look, that stuff will take care of itself, provided you focus on the people in front of you. Focus on making them better at what they do. Because ultimately, if you do that, then when you find yourself in some difficult environments, whether it's boarding a ship on the Indian Ocean or leading a troop attack in Afghanistan, the better your guys are, the better drilled they are, the more capable they are at doing their job, the safer they'll be, and the more likely you will have the effect you want to achieve on the enemy.
Right. Yeah, and I definitely I see a lot of organizations is torn and is ran down based on leadership. Basically, you have a lot of organizations where the leader um, instead of training and developing the people, they're more concerned about, just being demanding and telling people what to do and micromanage and all these different things. So let's because here on the Lead to Greatness community, we have a lot of leaders, have a lot of business owners, have a lot of entrepreneurs. How do you define leadership, and what do leaders exactly do?
That's a good question. So I think leadership is all about behavior. If I was to ask you, Cedric, what does a good leader look like to you? You would tell me some stories of people that have inspired you growing up, or
Absolutely.
people that you've worked with, that they did things that had an impact on you. And I think often that's the kind of first thing for leaders to do, is to reflect on what good looks like for them. Who were the people that inspired them? And if they don't have those examples, think about who were the ones that had a negative impact on them. Because I think you can learn as much from a bad leader as you can from a good leader. I think there are certain foundations that leaders have to have in their armory. They've got to create clarity. So in organizations that I work with, clarity is often something that isn't assumed, but you need to be clear on what is it the team is working towards, what's the purpose for this team or this organization, what's the mission in terms of who do we serve, and where's the big picture, where is it we're trying to get to. I don't think you can be a good leader unless you're able to build good and strong relationships with people. Most of the time when people talk to me about what good leadership looks like from their perspective, they'll tell me stories about how someone really took the time to get to learn and understand what made that individual tick. I think good leaders are accountable, so they hold themselves to account. So they own up to it when they've got things wrong, but equally they hold other people to account. I think they're decisive, they make decisions. And these are kind of the foundations that I sort of see. And then I think that the way my thinking has evolved about leadership is that if it's all about behavior is very much shaped by the context. So how you behave on a night out with your friends will be different from how you behave at a funeral. Now, you're still the same individual, you're still authentic, you're still the person that you are, but the context has changed, and therefore I think the behavior has to. And I think the best leaders I've worked with are able to quickly understand the context and choose a way of behaving that gets the best out of the situation. So, for example, if they were to take over a team where the previous boss was a complete tyrant, and had pushed people really hard and sort of burnt the bridges of the relationships, that might be the next leader taking that team over might go, well, actually, I'm just going to put a bit of an arm around everyone. I'm going to make them feel secure. I'm going to get to know them. And once they trust me and like me and see that I'm different from the last guy, then we can start to sort of, gradually focus on the performance of the organization. Equally, if you come into an organization and the performance isn't where it needs to be, because frankly, things have been, no one's been having any sort of difficult conversations, no one's been sort of, pushing people to sort of achieve things that they didn't believe they could achieve, then they may need to move to a more sort of challenging end of that spectrum. Right. And there are a number of spectrums. I sort of won't go into them in sort of huge amounts of detail now, but I think leadership for me is about understanding the context quickly and then dancing on the spectrum of where you need to be in terms of behavior. So you might need to, sometimes you might need to empower people. Other times, you might need to be really quite controlling. Right. If you and I walk across the road and see someone get hit by a car, you probably don't want me to turn around and empower you to call the ambulance. Yet, lots of people will say that leadership is all about that one thing. And I'm just not sure I agree. I think it's slightly different. I think it's a bit more complex than that. So that's how I've defined it. And I've been thinking about it for a while, trying to improve myself.
In your thought, how do most organizations fail their leaders?
So I think the way they fail their leaders is that they promote people who are technically competent. And there's nothing necessarily wrong with that, provided they've got sort of good people management skills. But more often than not, the sort of technical competence is valued over everything else. Right. Now, being an army man yourself, you'll understand this kind of metaphor. If the military did that, we'd promote all of the snipers to leadership positions because they're really good at soldiering, they're good at doing the job.
Absolutely.
But there are skills required to be a capable leader, whether it's at commissioned level or non-commissioned level, are very different. They're not totally sort of removed from each other. You wouldn't want someone who frankly is completely incompetent in a leadership position, obviously. But the skills required to lead people are different from that sort of technical competence. And I think the way most organizations let down their leaders is that they promote them because they are good at playing an instrument, and now they ask them to lead an orchestra. And they're two different jobs that require two different skills. And that's kind of how I think about it. The other way I think that they fail them is that they don't necessarily create the space for people not to be successful yet not lead. Now, what I mean by that is that if you are a brilliant salesman, right? Let's say that you just get excited by closing big deals. That may be the career path that you sort of want to be on. That's it. And I think the organization the organizations should be flexible enough to make space for people that want to specialize in an area and just, go after big deals that bring a big commission. And then also have a kind of leadership stream whereby you don't necessarily have to be as good as a salesman. You need to understand the process, but I'm more interested in someone that can manage and motivate a team of, say, 10 salespeople. Right. And I think that the organizations, if they really want to be great, will create flexible structures for people dependent on their skill set. And that's just a really simple example there. Make the space for those people that just want to use the sales example, be great deal chasers. That's it.
Yeah. Because I know a lot of organizations don't have a culture of teaching leadership. Most organizations just focus on the product, money, which money is is extremely important in the organization. But I believe most organizations fail in developing the people. So what type of things, you think, organizations can do to help, to begin to, I guess, getting away from just focusing on the product and focusing on the people at the same time to develop leaders?
Again, that's a really tough question. You have to be able to look at your organization and go, where does the interaction happen between our clients or our customers and our people?
Right.
It's not very often at the sort of really senior level. It's often in the products that they make, in the quality of those products, or it's in the service they provide. Mm-hmm. So I know most of your listeners will be American. When you walk into a Walmart, for example, you don't ever have any interaction with the CEO. You might know who he is by name. It's a big company.
Absolutely.
Your interaction with that organization, your perception of it, is based on the experience you have when you ask someone for help, when you've got a problem with a good that's faulty, or when you check out. The way in which they interact with you in the store is the way in which you feel about that organization and dictates whether or not you're going to go back.
Absolutely.
Now, if the manager or the shift team leader of the Walmart store, or the Walmart store manager is focused on improving the performance of those guys, things are going to look pretty healthy. If the regional manager is focused on improving the performance of his store managers, and so on and so on and so on, the organization is going to do really well. And organizations like, I think Zappos is the one in the States that the sort of shoe company, they hire people who are passionate about shoes.
Right.
That's kind of part of it. But equally, that I'm sure there is something in their culture there, which is all about focusing on improving the performance of the people at the front line who either make the products or who serve the customers. I think that's a key responsibility.
Awesome. Great answer. So for organizations, how do you create culture where feedback is actively sought after and well received?
My view of this is that everyone finds feedback difficult to take, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the reason for that is because, when we're growing up, the way we are conditioned in school and the way we are conditioned by our parents and the way we're conditioned by our early bosses and our early leadership is, you invest your heart and soul into something, and that is by and large the only way you're ever going to really achieve anything. And I'm sure that most of us have kind of learned that.
Absolutely.
From early age, we realize that our parents' love is unconditional, but actually their praise is very much based on the conditions, right?
Absolutely.
Of what we do.
Yeah.
And I think what this means is that at some point we tell ourselves a story that in order to do so really well at something, I need to invest huge amounts of my personality into my performance. And I think that often gets people to a really high level. But I think if you want to go to the next level above that, you need to be able to divorce the two concepts apart. So I do a lot of webinars, I do a lot of speeches, I do a lot of workshops. If I don't actively seek to try and pull that feedback out of my audience or my clients, they're not going to give me those nuggets of gold, those little ways in which I can improve things.
Right.
And if I'm sensitive to that, or if I respond negatively, then they're kind of less likely to share that stuff with me, if you know what I mean. Right. And the way I kind of think about it now is that, like this podcast, right? I prepare for these things. I do my best. I want to please you, even though we've only just met. I want to do a good job for the audience. But even if I have an absolute shocker, when I close my laptop down and go out and see my wife and my family, they'll see me for my personality and not my performance. They have no idea what's going on in here. And they'll see me for the character and the man I am, rather than what I do. And I think if you can divorce those two apart and you can seek some really blunt, direct feedback on your performance, you can use it to get better. And I think people struggle to divorce those two things apart. And that's one of the things that hinders them.
I think, really and truthfully, as a human being, feedback is very difficult. I tend to oftentimes ask my wife, I ask her opinion on something. And when she give me something or give me the response that I don't want, I tend to, get on the defense, and I just want to go, just go back and forth. I want to prove my case. And I believe a lot of times this happens in businesses, instead of somebody just accepting the fact that, what, let me take this as constructive criticism, because you have two different types of feedback. You have people that I heard them, defined as trolls. They're going to say something bad about everybody and everyone. They have a super negative life, and everything come out their mouth is negative. And, we have to definitely ignore people like that. But, it's also, that positive feedback where, somebody really cares about what you're doing and care about your leadership and care about making you better. I think definitely the feedback and accepting feedback in that area would definitely really help us, getting the ball moving and, being a better leader. And thinking about that even in organizations, for example, for the Lead to Greatness audience, you have entrepreneurs, you have CEOs, you have small business owners, you have people in senior leadership. And what tend to happen a lot, especially dealing with feedback, you'll have someone that's just working off the shop floor, for example, working on the floor. They have an issue, and they try to bring feedback back to senior leadership, and senior leadership do not accept the feedback or just kind of blow them off. But the person that's on the floor, they get an insight that the person in the office would never get. So what can you tell that leader, in that senior leadership, when someone from the floor is coming to you, with feedback that can be helpful? There's one little key thing that can change the trajectory of your business, of your operation, of the systems. What one key thing you would give that leader if you was coaching them?
I would say that, look, everyone's perspective is valid. And everyone's perspective is helpful. And it's always giving you an opportunity to get that little bit better. Because frankly, if you don't have that in the back of your mind, there's a kind of arrogance there that I would want to have a conversation about, and I'd want to address with you, or an insecurity on some level.
Right.
So like if someone is telling you, like, this is a way in which we can be better, you want to listen to that. And I think that, you don't get to control how someone gives you feedback. And some people can be really bad at giving it. It can come out like really aggressive and really angry. And you can't do anything about that. But you can always control how you respond to it and what you do with it. And I think that I don't mind if leaders maybe take one piece of feedback and go, yeah, I'm not going to do too much with that, right? Provided they are asking the question enough and encouraging it enough so that they can spot whether that is a theme or an anomaly in the data. Because if you don't ask for enough of it, like you can't sort of pull together, like where are the themes? Where are the ways of, I'm getting repeated feedback on, I don't know, how I talk to people first thing in the morning. And the moment that I come into work, they can see whether I'm in a good mood or a bad mood. Yeah. Like if one person says that, it's easy to cast it off. If 5 people out of 8 in my team go, yeah, do you know what, I've noticed that as well, then maybe I want to think about doing something about that.
Right, absolutely.
So yeah, for me, it's about looking for themes and ways in which you can improve and get better.
I was watching your TED Talk, and you said this thought that I thought was really interesting. It's called double loop learning. Yeah. Explain that a little bit to the audience.
So double loop learning is basically is where you go back and challenge the assumptions you made about a specific problem. And where it comes from is a sort of, my perspective is that, people always say, learn from experience. And the reality is not many people do, because often learning lessons, especially when you've made mistakes, can be incredibly painful. Wow. So, for example, a business might fail. And more often than not, people will say, well, it was this thing. It was this kind of single thing that caused it to fail. And actually, more often than not, there's about 5 or 6 things. And if they're not aware of those 5 or 6 things, they're more likely to make that mistake again because they haven't developed their awareness of it. So, my view with these things is that, like, it's a lot of the time, certainly the market and certain stuff out there, certain social media influencers will tell us messages that we already know and that we just like to have reinforced. Right. And I don't think there's necessarily a problem with that. But like Gary Vee can tell you as much as you like to do everything, and that you should be sleeping 4 hours a night and, working on your side hustle and kind of doing all these things. Like, I think there is validity to that. But equally, if you're working hard on a problem that no one is willing to pay for, then it doesn't matter how hard you work. Yeah. There are certain kind of fundamental things that sort of have to be in place.
Absolutely.
And I think that it's going back and challenging, like, did I really know enough about that market? Did I have a compelling and thoroughly differentiated proposition? Did I have a model that was kind of scalable? There are sort of almost like a kind of series of almost like stage gates. Yeah. And if you open enough of those stage gates, it's like a stream. The water or the money in this way will kind of flow through. Right. But it needs to be a big enough stream that you can open enough of them to sort of generate a revenue or an income. And I think double loop learning is about, if you've been through something where it hasn't worked out, really digging into the details, go, why did that go wrong? What were the underlying assumptions I made when I approached that project, that business, that, program? Why did it go wrong? And how did I play a part in that? Wow. And that's what it's all about.
Wow. And I like that. You said why. And I believe a lot of times, as leaders, in our marriages, parenthood, no matter what, I don't think we ask why enough. A lot of times we just things just kind of happen. We don't ask, the word why. Going back to what you said earlier about, what we learn in school, the instinct, in school, in order to go to the next grade, you get feedback. You would get an A, a B, a C, a D, or you would get an F. That's your feedback. So it's like everything you do, you get feedback. And I believe it takes away from the instinct of asking the question why, basically because the feedback is always provided and we don't have to ask those questions when we're in school. And here we are, you graduate and now you're grown, and all of a sudden it just kind of, the reality hit you and you're not getting the feedback anymore. And so now you're living life without feedback, and you're not asking the questions. And even another thing with that, as far as the word failure, I remember for years when I hear failure, it was just so negative. It was just so negative. I felt so bad. I mean, because in school, if you get an F, I mean, you failed. You failed. You didn't do great. But in life, I see it a little bit different, because a lot of things I failed at, and I failed a lot, but a lot of things I failed at, because of that failure, it was the only reason I'm in the position I am right now, based on the failure. But I could have took that failure and still had the same mentality as I had back in school, and failed, and just, okay, I made an F, and just move on. But now it's like I failed, and the question you said the why. I asked the question, why? If me and my wife having a issue with communication, maybe something didn't go right. She was a bad understanding, and now we upset with each other. Instead of just letting it be, it's always asking that question, why? Why did that happen? Did I approach her right? Did I say it wrong? Could I have done it better? So I love this double loop learning. I love it. I love it. And it's definitely something that most of us, we're doing it every day, but the fact of really just being intentional about it. What's harder, leading at work or leading at home?
That's a good one. I could go either way on this, depending on what the last 24 hours look like. I think, to be honest, it's, if you've got a good, healthy marriage, and a partner that believes in you and trusts you and wants you to succeed, then I think leading at home is easier, because you've got a really strong relationship there that you can lean on. In many respects, though, like, when you've got young children, that can make it much harder, because you're an example in the office, you're an example at home.
Yes.
The question is up to you, is what sort of example are you setting? Like, how is that having an impact on your children? Right. And all of us, I'm sure, have been impacted by our parents, positively and negatively. And a lot of people, moan and complain about that. And, people go through some really tough stuff. I'm not trying to belittle that in any way. But equally, I think it's a harder question to go, what sort of impact am I having on my children at home? I think in the work environment, it's easier to sort of, to kind of create those boundaries. But you don't have the sort of depth of relationship with your co-workers and with your team as you do with your wife most of the time. Right. There's a sort of little bit of kind of professional distance there. Right. Whereas, at home, suddenly, after bath time, when the kids are tired and they're messing around, it's very easy for all the sort of, all the best will in the world. Right. You try to control your behavior as much as you can, but, it can be difficult not to get a bit upset in an evening. And I think everyone does that from time to time. So I kind of answered the question sort of a roundabout there, but I think, I think it's probably easier to lead at home most of the time.
And I definitely agree. I definitely agree. I think, even the only thing I can say, I guess difficult leading at home versus at work. In business, you can fire someone, but you can't fire your kids. You can't fire your wife. And one thing, I was just talking to my wife about this the other day. We was talking about expectations, and a lot of times, with business, on the business side, it's like you have these expectations, but a lot of times you're adjusting the expectations. But at home, even for my son, I have my son, he's 17 years old, and my expectation for him is very high, and the expectation I have for my son, the expectation I have for a friend is totally different, because if the friend don't want it, or they don't want to learn, they don't want to develop, it's like, okay, I meet you here, and this is where you are. But my son, I can't do that with him, because of the love I have for him. I can't do that with my wife. I can't do that with, because based on the love I have for them, versus somebody else, is like, okay, if that's all you want in life, that's all you want. But it's kind of, you see what I'm saying? It's kind of difficult, to do that with your child.
I completely get that. There's a guy, He's American, actually. Guy used to be the chairman at Urenco over here, where I worked when I left the Marines. A guy called Gregory Smith. One of the best leaders I've ever come across, because he really got it.
Wow.
And his son was actually my line manager for a little while. And he told me the story that when he was growing up, his son said that, I think I sort of made some, off the cuff remark about how, someone else's behavior, well, so-and-so does this,
right.
So why can't I? And his dad turned around to him and said, the reason you can't is because you're a Smith, and I expect you to hold yourself to a higher standard.
Wow.
And that always resonated with me. He told me that story really close to 8 years ago now. And I think about that when I'm thinking with my children, because it's such an easy excuse to them. And I'm just like, you're a Yap. I expect better of you.
Yeah.
Hard to argue with that, because,
that is awesome.
I know sooner or later that's going to come back at me from one of my kids, and I'm creating a monster. But I completely understand it. You have that investment in them and their success. You want them to do well. You want them to be happy.
Yeah.
I completely understand.
Awesome. Let's shift a little bit. So let's talk about leadership forces. What inspired you to begin this journey?
So I guess, when I was speaking to my friends to kind of get a sense of, what civilian life looked like, because you've got no context for how the civilian world operates.
Yeah.
I got this sense that, leadership wasn't something that was particularly high on the agenda, wasn't something that, people were talking about. They'd often talk about kind of management and the role of, managing resources, but less about sort of leadership of people. And I saw the way that most organizations were promoting people based on technical competence. And I just felt that created an opportunity, because if I could teach or share with people a few of the lessons that I'd learned over the course of my career and make them like 5% better at a stage in their career, that was going to have an impact on not just them, but on all the people that they lead in their current team and all their future teams. And I think that this concept of purpose really revolves around one question, which is, how do I make a contribution that somehow makes the world a better place? And for me, that's how I do it.
Yeah.
So the reason I do it is because, lots of people are really unhappy in what they do. Often that's to do with the relationship they have with their leadership. It's not the fault of their leadership. Often they're just kind of working it out, and, they haven't been taught how to do it. And people aren't investing in them. People aren't giving them feedback. And so that's the problem that I try to solve. That's why I did it.
Wow. That's awesome. That is awesome. Wow.
Thank you. And my belief is that actually, depending on how often you have your one-to-ones, what you want to be doing is having a review of the individual's performance. So, sat down with someone, Cedric, what did you plan to do this month? What did you do? What did you learn? What are you going to do differently?
Yes.
Like something really, really simple.
Exactly.
Just keep it in a notebook. I just want to see that you are weekly taking time to reflect on what's working for you, what's not working for you.
Right.
And I'll share a perspective, I'll share a view, but, have you gone to these people in the organization to say, give me three things I do really well, three things you think I should do to improve. Make it more informal, make it more part of the culture, rather than just being this kind of systemized process that everyone hates and doesn't really kind of drive anything.
Yeah.
So, webinars that might sort of focus on things like that. And, sometimes we might go off site, we might go outside. Other times we might be in not hotel rooms, but in hotel conferencing suites. And it really, really just depends on the sort of client and what it is they're looking to achieve.
That's awesome. Let me ask you a question. So how has failure shaped you?
Oh, gosh. I think failure is the greatest teacher that you can have about yourself. I have learned about assumptions that I've made that are completely flawed, and things that I've got totally wrong. In 2010, before I left the Marines, I applied for Special Forces selection. And the way in which you do that, there is a series of kind of physical tests that you go through. one of the things I had to go through was something called Officers Week, which was a kind of series of like planning exercises. And on the course kind of running up to that, I passed all the physical stuff, and they take the officers away and they give you a sort of, like a mini kind of planning exercise. And I had to do a few of them. And I think on the last day, the directing staff came to me and said, look, the senior leadership, they're gonna leave early. So they're gonna put you last because they think they've seen enough of you and they like what they see. And I was like, happy days, I'm well in for this. And so all I had to do was I felt I just need to sort of focus on my fitness. I don't need to worry about that, that planning stuff, because I seem to be doing quite well at that. And then I failed on the planning stuff. And so, I think I'm certainly not scared of failure, but I'm keen to, I think it's one of the most useful ways in which you can learn about yourself, what you think you're good at, what you're not good at, and ways in which you can get better. And there are plenty more things that I'm going to get wrong. I think the key thing actually that I find really helpful, and I think a lot of people can sort of practically take away from this is, Simon Sinek talks about the kind of whole concept of purpose. I'm sure you've heard of him. He gets it from Viktor Frankl and his book, Man's Search for Meaning. And there's a whole branch of therapy dedicated to this whole area, which is called logotherapy, which is all about finding the meaning for your life. There is no universal meaning for life. You got to find your own meaning for life. And I did the exercises. I thought about it. I spent a lot of time thinking about it. The meaning of my life is effectively fulfilled by my business. And once I realized that, I was like, well, do you know what? I obviously don't want my business to fail. But if it does, provided I still stay in the sort of people development and leadership development world, like I've won. That's it. I only want to be living in that domain because there's enough breadth in the word leadership that makes it kind of interesting for me. Right. And that's where I want to play. I'm currently looking at, some of the stuff from, on the value of kind of cognitive diversity, and some of the stuff that I've heard from a guy called David Epstein, who wrote a book called Range, which talks about how breadth is a really valuable commodity, a variety of experiences in a kind of complex world. And I just know that like that, if you can move the conversation on say diversity beyond just purely like race and gender, beyond towards this kind of cognitive diversity, or to talk about like, the value of differing experiences, I just think you stand a much greater chance of getting organizations to take it seriously. And like stuff like that interests me, because I'm a big believer in equality of opportunity. Awesome. And if I can help organizations with that, and I can help other people with that, and I can change, just shift the needle slightly differently, that's going to be valuable for people. That's what I'm interested in.
That's awesome. What book has been a great impact on the way you lead?
You
can say that one book.
Huge number of them. If I had to say one, I would say one that most of your audience probably wouldn't have heard of. But there's a book called Stoicism and the Art of Happiness by a guy called Donald Robertson. Okay. And Stoicism there are a number of things to Stoicism that we won't go into now, but I love this idea that you can choose to be happy. It's just about the way that you think about things. So you can't influence the events that happen in the world. You can't influence the coronavirus. You can't influence the fact that Donald Trump is the president. You can't influence all of these kind of things, right? That people get really upset about. Right. You can choose how you want to feel about these things. And I think, happiness is an art. And I think everyone can be happy. It's just a question of sort of almost like working on it. And one of the key components of that is the ability to think flexibly, to look at a problem and look at a situation and go, right, this isn't good, but it could be much worse. Wow. I used to work for someone that, the first question they would ask is, right, is anyone dead? No? Okay. Well then, how do we undo this situation?
That is awesome.
And it was awesome.
I love it. And I gotta write that down. I love that. That's a great perspective.
And it really was. Wow. And then they actually said, and if anyone is dead, well, we can't do anything about that. So we just have to work out what we're going to do next.
Yes, I love it. I love it. I love it.
And so I love that ability to think flexibly, because if you can think flexibly about people, if you can think flexibly about the situations you find yourself in, the context in your organization, you're far more likely to be a better leader. And leaders that I've been inspired by are the ones that go, you know, this person isn't performing, obviously, but I don't believe anyone comes to work not wanting to perform. There's got to be some stuff that's getting in the way. And if I can't help them and I have to let them go, that's a failure of my leadership. So it's a different level of accountability and a flexible perspective on the individual. I think that stuff is so powerful. That would be the one that some of your readers might not have come across. It's a hidden gem for me.
Wow. Thank you so much. Wow, man, this has been a great interview. I've really enjoyed, the conversation. If someone wanted to connect with you and what you're doing, where should they go?
So the social network I'm most active on is LinkedIn. One of the great things about having a unusual name is that people can find you on these platforms. So Roderic Yapp, Y-A-P-P. Just hit me up with a connection request. I'll always accept, unless for some reason I think you look like some Russian spy or something like that. I'll always connect. If you can say that you heard me on the Lead to Greatness podcast, brilliant, because then I know where these things come from. That's really helpful. And just tell me what you enjoyed, what you think I could have done differently, what I could have done to be a better guest. I'm always up for that kind of feedback. So LinkedIn, my website is leadershipforces.com. You can find me there.
On the behalf of the Lead to Greatness community, I want to thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to add value to us.
No worries, Cedric. I'm really happy to be here. I really enjoyed the conversation. Keep doing what you're doing, mate. And I wish you great things.
Thank you so much. Once again, I want to thank you, Lead to Greatness Nation, for joining us again. Looking forward to hanging out with you again on next week. Until then, remember, if you help others reach their greatest potential, together we can change the world. Have a good one.